Brian, let's go ahead and bring you in. I think I've kept you waiting long enough. You work in applied innovation, and I think a lot of folks would agree that Atsuka is one of the more innovative companies out there. And certainly when it comes to virtual trials, I think your company was one of the early adopters of this technology. I've spoken to some of your folks in the past, and this is a company that definitely did not say, let's sit back and watch what happens and then decide where to go with this. You kind of jumped right in and said, we're going to make this happen. Can you tell us why Otsuka opted to implement this technology when it did, and maybe some thoughts on how they came to that decision?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, at Otsuka, we've recognized the potential benefits of virtual trials for some time. I think, in general, so few people participate in clinical trials already. If you look at the research, only 35% of people say that they would consider participating in a clinical trial. Within cancer, where you would think there'd be a lot of participation, it's less than 5%. And then if you look at even those individuals that do participate in clinical trials, almost 25% of them say the thing that they dislike the most is the distance to the clinic, the length of those visits. So, I mean, I think the question is, if we have a way, like a virtual clinical trial, to potentially increase participation, why would we not all be implementing it? I mean, by making it possible for patients to participate from home or remotely, obviously the hope is that it'll reduce the cost and the burden for the patients. But obviously, any kind of remote participation requires certain digital and electronic capabilities, and at least at Otsuka, as we've evolved in the digital medicine space, with kind of implementing some real-time data capabilities, we also began to shift on the clinical trial side, going to fully electronic data capture, and developing what we call an e-platform with full e-source, full e-consent. So as we gradually moved into that space of really having all our trial data fully electronic, it was really just a natural transition to start exploring clinical trials virtually.
And I think every new technology implementation comes with its own challenges. And I'm sure a lot of the people who are listening in today have challenges they're concerned about. And I believe one of our later poll questions will touch on that a little bit. But can you walk us through or discuss some of the challenges that your company faced when you began to implement these new technologies, and perhaps some thoughts on how you were able to overcome those or get around them in some way?
Sure. So, I mean, at Otsuka, unconventional thinking is one of our core values. So implementing new approaches and ideas is kind of expected. So I guess the challenges we face may not be as significant as some other companies. But, as I mentioned, we've been rolling out aspects of fully digital, fully electronic, non-paper trials for some time. So it was just a natural extension to start implementing the virtual trials. But having said that, I think anytime you implement anything new, there's bound to be challenges. And for those that have been in clinical trials for a while, if you recall, I mean, 10, 15 years ago when we transitioned from paper CRFs to EDC, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions and concerns about that process. I think one of the biggest hurdles, and Katherine mentioned as well, is really making sure that you have socialized and communicated the concept of virtual trials internally with your stakeholders. So, and not just senior management, but the different functional areas and project teams that are actually going to be the ones doing the day-to-day implementation. So we found it to be really important to socialize, communicate this, and in a tangible way, not very abstract, hypothetical scenarios, but really tangible that means something to the individuals that are doing it. I would say that the second challenge is designing and accommodating sufficient training. So both internally and externally. I think oftentimes organizations underestimate the amount of planning and training that's required to implement something new. because I think we need to remember, I mean, at first glance, the thought is, oh, well, it's our clinical sites that this is really going to be the biggest shift for, in terms of how do they conduct visits virtually, how do they learn the new technology, but we also have to think about from the patient perspective. This is completely new. There are different steps and pieces that have to be put in place for patients to be able to do it, as well as all your internal folks that now are looking at different data streams and having to look at data differently.
Yeah, you mentioned senior management, and I think that is so critical. And you also mentioned earlier, you were talking about innovation and having that mindset that we're thinking outside of the box and doing different things. How critical was it that you had senior management on board with this? And is their role, does that involve, I guess, talking to employees and reinforcing that idea that this is something we're going to do because our patients and our trials and sites demand it?
Yeah, it's a lot of times when we're rolling out a new initiative, you've got to do a bit of a roadshow where you take the time, you're going to talk with senior management initially to get their endorsement, and you've got to certainly present a good business case outlining the risks and the potential benefits. Provide some budget expectations and also hopefully there's some cost reduction that can be achieved for this or other innovations. But it's critical to initially get that more senior level endorsement, and then to do a bit of a roadshow and go to all the functional areas and say, here's the concept, here's the idea, here's what we'd like to do, and here's why. Please give us your feedback. What do we need to do to make sure this is successful, and include all those stakeholders in the process so they can be part of it, so they can be engaged and really be invested in making it successful.